Well, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started in just 1 minute here. Just giving Zoom a moment to allow everybody into the meeting, and a few people are still joining. So good morning. Glad to have everybody here on our Dignified Learning webinar. Happy Friday. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get the presentation started. We still have a few people joining us, and they'll be kind of rolling in here this morning as we get started. But welcome, everybody. Just a few housekeeping items for you today. And I might repeat myself here in a few minutes, but in this Zoom session, we just ask that you use the chat functionality to ask questions, and feel free to do that at any time. We do have a moderator who we'll introduce in just a moment who can take those questions, prioritize them, and send them to Emily and I, who are presenting today. So again, just feel free to use the chat feature really at any time this morning, and we'll be prioritizing those questions and responding in the order in which we receive them. Again, Callie, who we'll introduce in a moment, is going to help moderate that and organize questions as they come in. So good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Matt Worthen. I work at Next Step Networking in Cincinnati, Ohio. We are so happy to be here today. I am a vice president at Next Step, responsible for all manner of fun and interesting tasks and challenges. And with me today is Emily Miller. Emily and I are your presenters. Hopefully we have a fun time today and bring you some value. So before joining Next Step, I worked in public education. I worked on technology integration, deploying all types of different technologies and supporting teachers in their day-to-day job, supporting kiddos and their families on how to use technology. And now we get to consult about tech and training and all these interesting topics. So again, my co-presenter is Emily Miller. Emily, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So like Matt said, I work with him at Next Step, and over the last couple of years together, Matt and I have built our Dignified Learning division. I am, from the education world. I am a former teacher and school administrator, worked heavily in curriculum and assessment development, and really came to Next Step with the idea that I wanted to create services that I was looking to provide my staff that I just couldn't find out in the world for training and professional development. And it's just been a real honor to get to work in this space every day.
So with us today, before I introduce the company, is Callie Heilickenberg. Callie is helping us moderate. We'll be watching the chat, and is an instructional designer here at Dignified Learning, which is our e-learning and professional development division at Next Step. So welcome, Callie. Thanks for your help this morning. So I want to take a moment and just tell you a little bit about who Next Step is. We're an IT managed service provider. We're going on 35 years as an IT company in Southwest Ohio. So we are one of the oldest and longest standing IT consulting groups in the state. And we do all manner of IT networking and support. But really, what we're talking about today is our custom e-learning. And Emily can help introduce our abilities and capabilities there. But we are always looking for really talented people to join our growing company and help us deliver solutions to our clients across the tri-state area.
So, just to introduce some of the work that Dignified Learning is up to, broadly speaking, we do a lot of support for all different sorts of training, but our specialty is helping organizations transition from in person training to online training, whatever that might look like for your organization. And we take a lot of pride in our unique approach. We take all of the fundamentals we learned in working in education and we apply that through the lens of the e-learning we create. And what makes it unique is that we aren't focused on the information or the tool that we're training on. We're focused on how that learner is going to need to apply that information and how we're going to make it relevant for them. And with that, I think we can go ahead and jump into today's topic. When we sat down and tried to plan a webinar topic, we really thought about what are our clients saying? What are they struggling with right now? And when we did that brainstorm, we really came up with some universal struggles right now. What's wrong with most communication right now? Well, people are at an all-time high when it comes to experiencing boredom in their day-to-day work. And whether they are working remotely or whether they are actually in person, but they might as well be remote because they're socially distanced and they're using a lot of those same tools that remote workers do, we're all struggling right now. So we're going to unpack that a little bit and talk through it. And when we really think about, those pain points that we're experiencing right now, where we are disengaged and bored, there are a lot of the same pain points that we hear when we talk about training challenges and why are most trainings boring and why right now are we struggling so much to get our teams to engage with us?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Emily. The one thing that I think we can all relate to is so much of this communication and training is both overwhelming and underwhelming simultaneously. We get a lot of information and we have to process through that information. But at the same time, the way that information gets presented to us in this constant stream, all these different methods can be overwhelming. At the same time, it's underwhelming in the way it's presented to us.
Yeah, so when we think about how communication and training has really shifted, and COVID has certainly accelerated it, we're moving things online that weren't traditionally ever online, right? But we're not really taking a critical eye at what the state of that communication or that training experience was like before it was online. So we're taking what was old and we're just transferring it onto this platform. And there's this misconception out in the world that more technology is better and that if you are using technology, it's going to be more interesting and more engaging. And I kind of have this picture in my head of taking your traditional presentation where you have your audience in front of a PowerPoint for 8 hours and you're just transferring that into a more exciting platform. You're moving that to a carnival or to Topgolf or to some other kind of entertaining venue. And when we really think about that concept, that seems preposterous to us. But we have this false sense that if we're using technology and if we're online, it's going to be better. So we're gonna deconstruct that a little bit and talk about why that is and how to make it different.
Yeah, absolutely, Emily. One thing that we see and we hear from our clients is, have we picked the right platform? Meaning, is Zoom the right one, or is it Microsoft Teams? Is it Google Meet, or is it something else? And I'll tell you today, you haven't picked the wrong platform, no matter what it is. The reason for that is you have to start with purpose and intentionality and structure before you can criticize if your platform is the right one and if it's working for you. Uh, a funny story that I like to tell is we had a client call in and say, "Gosh, I just need to get off of Zoom because people keep drawing mustaches on me during Zoom meetings. They keep using that darn annotation tool and they keep messing around." Which is funny, right? But it doesn't mean that Zoom is the wrong platform for your organization. We just need to talk about, this new world that we're living in and the way to use the tools that fit your organizational culture and those expectations for, how to collaborate today.
And the part that makes our work so collaborative and fun is that Matt can tell you the IT solution. He can tell you how to turn the annotation tool off. I'm going to want to tell you and talk about why people are annotating in the first place and how to get to the root cause of the problem. And when we look at that root cause, most of the platforms we're working with are designed for one-way modes of communication. They're set up for one person to explain the information and then for the audience to just simply absorb it, which is hard to create that engaging dynamic. And that's really why we're so bored. Like Matt said, participation is always going to matter more than platform. So when we look at the root cause of why we feel bored, we're clicking through things, we have passive experiences where we're just kind of taking in that information. And the intention of most communications in the workplace is to get people to just understand what's being conveyed, rather than truly giving them the space to process it so that they can apply that information. So this is one of the most common requests that we get right now, which is my learners or my team or my employees, they're bored. Like Matt said, what are the new platforms that people are using? What kind of gamification components do we need? Do we need virtual reality? And those are all wonderful conversations. And all of these tools on the screen can be very effective. But before we get there, let's talk about some fundamentals and some things that I think you'll find really empowering that don't require any investment, any new training, any new initiatives. They're just simple ways that you can modify your behavior slightly so that you're increasing that engagement.
Absolutely, Emily. And if we could take just a quick moment here and give our audience an opportunity to use the chat box, I would love to hear from you. What are you using today? What has your organization discussed using? And again, there's no wrong answer. We're not going to criticize or pick apart any of your ideas or processes. We would just love to know what comes to mind within your organization that you've been trying to use, and how has it been going? I just want to pause for just a quick moment and allow for some feedback.
I'm hoping for some funny stories here or some painful anecdotes that we can look back and laugh at now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just allowing for some comments to come in here, and we'll discuss those in just a second. So thanks everybody for using the chat box and for allowing your voice to be heard in this format. Again, these meetings are tough sometimes, but thanks everybody for using that as those are rolling in. And I'll go ahead and share my screen again and bring us back, and we can discuss that. Yeah, so lots of good feedback here, Emily. I just want to give you an opportunity to kind of, respond in real time. So we've got some comments here about, everything Google, trying to use PowerPoints and videos to teach job readiness. Looking at Zoom as the primary platform, but the use of breakout rooms for deeper discussion.
Exactly, and how you're going to, I would say, make those videos, and how you're going to structure that information so that those videos will actually be watched, is a topic for an upcoming webinar. And we also are going to have some resources at the end of this. Actually, we're going to give all the participants access to one of our free courses about communicating so others will speak, listen, and act. And a big component of that is, talking about the video creation process. What are the best practices? How can you actually, even if you make the best video in the world, how can you make sure that it actually gets watched? And I think later on we're going to hit on some of those concepts too in this webinar, but I just wanted to call that out for a moment. All of those comments are really helpful, and this discussion is important. And what I have learned from my background in education that I don't think other people that are professionals in other areas necessarily realize is that every single time you are presenting new information, regardless of how you're presenting it, you're asking your audience to learn. And when you're asking someone to learn something, there is a lot of science behind how to do that effectively. There are a lot of very tangible techniques that often, if we're just not intentional or aware of them, we're leaving so much opportunity on the table to make such a big difference with what we're trying to get across. And so the biggest challenge I always bring up to our clients when we talk about this is, what is the true purpose of your communication? What are you truly trying to accomplish when you send that email, when you make that video, when you pick up the phone for that call? What is that overall goal of the communication? Figuring that out is the most important step to knowing how to get your audience to engage with you. And what we discover is that most of the time when we unpack the real reason behind a communication, we're trying to accomplish behavior change, or we're trying to challenge the way someone thinks or processes information. So whether you're talking about training someone on how to use a new tech tool, or sending a simple email communication about submitting expense reports on time, all of those things, we're hoping for some behavior change. We're hoping for some processing time cognitively from your audience. And what do you need with that? In all honesty, you need engagement. So when we think about, is this really the answer? When our clients come to us and say, what do I need to spend money on? What do I need as far as technology goes? There are a lot of very exciting tools and features out in the world that are great attention grabbers. And gamification can be such a powerful, helpful tool. Same thing with virtual reality. I would never argue that. But what I would say is that you want to think about engagement as the foundation. Engagement is the basement of the structure you're building. And when we talk about gamification, that's the the top story of your skyscraper. If you try to jump into that first, you're not going to have the success you want to. And the good news is that that basement level, that's accessible to everyone without any tech.
Yeah, absolutely, Emily. Even though we're an IT company and an e-learning company, we like to say don't buy tech for tech's sake. We don't want you to spend your money in a way that you think it's a new widget or it's something that's just going to drive this level of entertainment. In education, I saw this a lot. And one thing that I think rings true to schools and local governments and nonprofits is even if you have the money to do it, you only have that money to do it once. And so we can't go back and undo that spending. And so if we really think about purpose and outcome first, even though these things are cool and fun, let's just really take a critical, close look at the outcomes we're expecting and make sure that they're realistic.
So when we're talking about, what is learning really about, it is not about entertainment. It is about engagement. And let's unpack that a little bit and talk about what we mean. Educators have a really solid foundation for what this means, and we're gonna think through how to replicate some of those mindsets. So traditionally, the way most professionals are trained through kind of a management mindset is that when they need to convey information, the focus is on the information. And the assumption is that if you are providing your team the information, kind of regardless of how you're doing it, they're going to understand it. That is the assumption. And there's very little feedback loop, very few feedback loops actually purposely put in place to see if that understanding even occurs, right? And that's why we're so frustrated all the time. That's why we say, gosh, no one reads my emails. I put that in an email 3 months ago, and now I'm getting questions about it again. If you shift to more of an educator mindset around your communication modes, you're not going to be so focused on the information. Your primary focus is going to be on how to present that information. Because teachers know that even if you share the information, if the students don't understand it, if your learners don't understand it, you're really not doing your job effectively. And the expectation from an educator's perspective is that learners can actually apply that information. And that's where a lot of our communication loops fall short, is that we're just looking for understanding and we're forgetting to encourage and check for application.
Yeah, and here at Next Step and Dignified Learning, we refer to really anyone who's receiving information as a learner. And so you'll hear Emily and I talk about learners, but we do want you to see yourself in that. You can supplement that word for your staff, for your volunteers, for your board, but anyone who's receiving information from you, you are asking them to learn that information. So at Dignified Learning, we just talk about anyone who's receiving information as a learner.
Yep, absolutely. So what's the difference? I've mentioned this before, engagement versus entertainment. Let's talk about this a little bit. Let's dig into the definitions that we're going to use. So when I say engagement, I am meaning that you have a cognitive or emotional commitment to a task. Just think about that for a minute. Think about the times where you have been compelled to stick with something, even if it wasn't necessarily riveting or entertaining, but think about the times when you've been more curious, where you've been interested, where maybe there's a video online and we're not talking about following a plot from a show. We're talking about trying to understand a concept at a deeper level. Think about the times when you've been compelled to complete a word search or a crossword puzzle or solve a Rubik's Cube. Those are examples of your brain being engaged rather than entertained. And it's so easy. There's so many attention grabbers out there right now that are focused on entertainment. But if you think about engagement and try to recall a time when you have been engaged and think about that through the lens of what we're going to share, I think that's going to be really helpful in you being able to implement some of these tips that we're going to talk about. When I say entertainment, I mean the act of being provided with amusement or enjoyment. You're not necessarily having to think critically, but you're just really interested in kind of absorbing the information in a passive way and not necessarily having to create your own meaning from it. So entertainment will hold a learner's attention. Okay, if you have that gamification component, it will do that. But it's ultimately a very passive experience often, right? Think about watching your favorite show. It's not something that you are actively involved in. And what we know is that learning is rooted in active engagement and participation. So let's talk through what some of that is going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely, Emily. One thing that sometimes will backfire, and we've seen this before in trainings that we've had to participate in as learners, is if you try too hard to entertain your audience, it can backfire and feel cringeworthy. People can actually be turned off if you try too hard to rally the troops and have this big hurrah moment, or use cheap entertaining tricks or what have you. It might keep attention, but it will lose the audience pretty quickly, and people will turn off. One of the things that we can talk about is when you're asking someone to learn versus just sit and be entertained, is the difference in their mindset, right? We need to allow space for a learner to be ready to learn, and we need to think about that. How are the environmental factors around them? What does that look like for the learner in their physical space, in their mental space, to receive information and allow time to process that information?
Yeah, I'm remembering when I was in college, I went to a diversity training seminar as part of my education program, and the presenter opened. He was not a singer, not a professional singer by any measure, but he opened with singing Aretha Franklin's "Respect," and he just lost 75% of the audience. He tried to do something that was funny and that would engage us, but really it's just the rest of his message kind of fell on just a disengaged audience that, he lost credibility from that.
And we're not trying to, be the entertainment police, but what we, the underlying message is about your outcomes and about spending money wisely for training and delivering training in a way that meets those outcomes head on without focusing on the wrong things.
So engagement is what is the magic seed you need to plant to get your behavior changes and to get people to actually think and process through what you're trying to tell them. So I just want you to think about this for a moment. When you are looking at entertainment by itself, okay, and imagine you're binge watching your favorite Netflix show, right? It's going to keep attention in the short term. It's going to maybe lead to some memorable moments, but long term, you're not going to retain or apply the information you're getting out of that experience. And you rarely feel a sense of intrinsic accomplishment, right? After watching 8 hours of your favorite show. Um, and that's by and large, when people report that they feel like, well, yeah, I enjoyed that show, but I feel like I spent too much time on it. I didn't really get much accomplished. That's really your brain saying, I wasn't fully engaged during that. And was that a worthwhile use of time? And when we're talking about engagement, it should hold the attention of your audience throughout the presentation, not just at those key moments where something is flashing or you're earning a badge. And it will lead to, like we said, knowledge being easily applied and retained, and feeling like you have actually accomplished something. There's some intrinsic motivation there, because you've been part of the process and you've participated.
So, Emily, why are we talking about entertainment so much? From your perspective, why has this topic been so important to talk about today?
I think it's because there is a sense of people feeling like they understand the problem that's at hand, but they feel disempowered and have the misconception that they need to have more entertaining things that are driving the way they work or the way they train or the way they communicate with their team. And I think that we all just need a confidence boost right now. Everybody wants to have a more meaningful connection with their colleagues, with their coworkers, with the clients that they serve. And to do that, I think engagement is absolutely the key to unlocking that door. Which brings us to kind of our favorite part of this, which is talking about some practical strategies. We want to get people to read their email, to participate in your meetings, to complete their training videos, and we're gonna delve into some easy things that you can try right now. So when I say strategies, really I want you to be more intentional about thinking about the purpose of the communication and then thinking about what you're asking of your audience. And it is so easy to get caught up in just conveying the information. And we miss opportunities every day, all the time, to ask open-ended questions. And I know we all know what an open-ended question is, right? It's a question without a yes or no answer. There usually isn't a right or wrong answer. But just the act of sharing information and then taking a moment to ask an intentional open-ended question involves getting your audiences to think about what you've just said, to express their opinions on it, and invites a call to action. They know that they can't just kind of glaze over, that they are going to be expected to share and compute that information with you, and it encourages that processing time. I'm going to talk about processing time so much. It's such an important component to making sure that information gets understood and can be applied. So the biggest kind of challenge and question I get is, do open-ended questions really drive engagement and discussion, or do they just intimidate people and shut them down? And what I would say is, be transparent with your team. If you're on a call with them and you have been kind of operating under the assumption that one person talks and the rest of the group listens, and then maybe you give the permissions for another participant to share their screen and they go through it. Talk about working to change the culture on these calls or in these emails. Talk about the fact that, we're going to try to have more conversation. I'm going to try to be more intentional as the person that's leading this discussion and actually hearing from you. And the first couple of times you do it, there might be crickets and people might be a little bit anxious about responding, but the more you do it and the more you can just make it a natural part of what happens in your meetings, the easier it will get, and it really will become just a part of the process, and people will feel empowered because they're actually being asked for their take on the information. So some easy strategies. One of my favorite things to think about is meeting agendas, right? We all make them, we all receive them. Back when it was a physical piece of paper, most of us just doodled on them as we were probably bored listening to information. And I think that they have kind of become more a formality, a sign of professionalism, maybe, but not a useful tool that can be utilized to get people to process the content that's going to be discussed in that meeting. So when we talk about, being engaged and being active as the measure of engagement, the passive experience is just to show up and get the agenda, read it, probably throw it away, or put it in a digital folder somewhere at the end of the meeting. You can flip that switch and change that dynamic so easily. Instead of just providing the agenda, take a moment to ask an open-ended question, right? At the start of a meeting, before you've shared any information, imagine just asking your department, what did I leave off this agenda? What are we not scheduled to talk about today that we should be? That is such a powerful way of getting feedback and getting insight, not only in getting your meeting participants to think about what's going to be presented before them, but you're going to get an insight into what are they prioritizing? What are they worried about? What do they see as issues going on? And at the same time, asking your audience, whether it's before you present the information or after you present it, how do you perceive that this is going to impact your role? How might this change your job? How might this change the way you interact with a client tomorrow, or the way you, go about running your subcommittee meetings? And those conversations are invaluable. They do more than just engage your audience, but they're going to help you move forward as an entity, as an organization.
Yeah, Emily, one of the things that we are seeing in doing actively, both at Dignified Learning and at Next Step, is the creative use of video. One thing that gets, kind of missed, I think, and it's such a missed opportunity because it's free and it's easy to do, is to companion written materials with a video. And I encourage all of you on this call to try this. If you're putting together an agenda, and it's going to be on Microsoft Teams or Google Drive, maybe you should take 30 seconds and record a little talking head video that's going to go with that agenda. Opening up the meeting, explaining why the meeting is happening, or asking these open-ended questions up front. The more time you can allow a learner to process, and the different modalities in which you can present information, the better the result's going to be. Some people will prefer to just hit play and watch that 30-second video and handwrite the response to those open-ended questions. You will see a night and day difference in preparation and participation in your meetings and a deeper level of conversation if you can allow that processing time. And again, it's an easy thing to try. It's just to record yourself 30 seconds, a minute, and put that link either with the email with the agenda, in the calendar invite, or maybe in the agenda itself, that the participants can watch ahead of time and show up with a different mindset, right? I mean, how many of us just glance at an agenda and say, okay, thanks, I'll be there on time, without really spending just a couple minutes to absorb that information and think how they can show up to support you, right? Because we don't want to have meetings that could have just, been an email.
And the one thing I will say about that, I mean, I think those are all great ideas. The one challenge I would have to you is it is if you are not accustomed to making videos and to being the person that's on camera, it is not easy. I was actually working with a client recently, and she was making some video content specifically for her team, and it was a short video. She said, "No problem, I'll have this to you in 20 minutes." Well, 2 hours later, she texted me and she said, "Oh my goodness, recording a 3-minute video is the hardest thing I've ever done." And it is a something that is far outside of a lot of people's comfort zones if you're not used to doing it. And in addition to learning the tech, there is that, if you're an introverted person, or you're not used to being on camera like that, you're always your own worst critic. Um, you know, one mistake and you feel like you have to throw the whole video out. And so if you are that person, I will say, stay tuned. In the next few webinars, we are slated to talk about video creation. And I would say just keep an open mind about it. Even if you say that's something I just could never do, I'm not comfortable with it. Keep an open mind, because the research is really showing that the people we work with want to see us. They want to interact with us, even if your hair and makeup isn't done, or even if the video isn't perfect. It goes such a far way in building that relationship piece that's also going to drive engagement and help people feel more connected right now, which is something we all just so desperately need. So try to keep an open mind about that. We're going to revisit that topic in a couple weeks.
Yeah, absolutely, Emily. I want to close the loop on that too, because we've actually received some feedback that the less robotic you sound, the more natural you are. If the dog's running through the room, that's the video people want to watch, than the perfect on script, reading every line. Just be yourself as much as you can be, and feel natural about it. It takes practice, it takes time, but it will drive a different level of engagement in information consumption. And I know we're not talking about it in this webinar, but we have some free tools that will add your little subtitles to the bottom of videos too, if that's something that you want. Different learners, different abilities. People like to watch and read simultaneously, and we can get into that as well. So.
And I promise you, all of these things, if you're not a tech person, as we hear so often, I'm not either. So if we are sharing a tool or saying that something is possible, it has to meet my test, and be manageable. Which, when we cross that bridge coming up, we will talk about the how-to components of the tech, as well as how to feel more comfortable when you're presenting. And in kind of getting back to this concept of open-ended questions, once you get used to open-ended questions, they will naturally get more complex, more conversational, more natural. But in the beginning, when you are first, trying this technique out, a lot of times we'll hear like, well, yeah, I do want to ask my audience open-ended questions, but I just don't know what to ask or how to phrase it, and I'm kind of afraid of what I'm going to hear. So I like to think about things in terms of a spectrum always. On the left-hand side, the easiest option is having a simple open-ended question. Say, give me a one-word summary of what we just discussed. That is a really low stakes, low pressure endeavor for everybody involved. Number one, you don't have to prepare for to ask the question. It can be universally applied to pretty much any situation. But this is seemingly a simple task for your audience. Okay, everybody can just raise their hand and say one word, right? But the magic about this, the educator in me loves this question. Because when you say to somebody, give me a one word answer, that is a simple task for them to do, but it is not easy. And it's not easy because think about it. If I said to you right now, give me a one word summary of this webinar, you would have to think through and process. There's that magic word again. You would have to process everything we've discussed, and then you would have to prioritize the most important ideas, and you would have to select the one term that encompasses all of them. And then if you take it a step farther and you say, great, thank you for sharing that term. What made you think about that? And then they have to verbally or in writing and text have to explain how they arrived there. That is the highest mark of engagement. When they are processing that information, internalizing it, that's what's going to make it memorable in the long run. And then once you get comfortable with this, there's lots of flexibility. You can ask really in-depth questions. You can do it as a group. You can ask your audience, based on what we just presented or what we just talked about. What's the question that we should be asking right now? So again, this is not a time-consuming task. It just requires some intentionality on your part. So, these are just some easy other examples in addition to that one-word summary. What was the main point of the video or the email or the text, and how are you going to apply it to your role? How do you think this new idea could be implemented in our department? What is something that could be added to improve or enhance the information you learned today or we talked about today, or the information in this email? So these are 3 questions you could copy and paste and put in just about any context, and make that for yourself. Get used to this. Make 5 open-ended questions and have them in a document that's easy to copy and paste, and just make it part of your process. Something that I just want to call out here is I want you to be careful not to mistake conversation with engagement. And what do I mean by that? Well, sometimes we'll have conversations with our clients and they'll say, yeah, we're highly engaged in our work. I've got this amazing team. They really like each other. They hang out after work together. We're great. We don't have a problem with engagement. And when I observe and dig a little bit deeper or ask some additional questions, what I'm uncovering is that the group, the department, the audience, whoever that is, they have a really good rapport with each other. They usually personally like each other. They'll get on the Zoom calls in the morning and talk about, their kids' soccer games, or what they watched on TV last night, or, what they're doing this weekend. But that kind of collaborative discussion stops the moment you introduce whatever the topic is at hand, that is the focus of the meeting. So just something to keep in mind. Ask yourself, when people talk in our Zoom calls, how much of that conversation is really related to work? How much of the laughter is really related to work? And how much of it isn't? And it's not that there's anything wrong with people having a personal rapport with each other and having that virtual water cooler discussion. It's just that you also want to have that when you're talking about the work that you're doing. So another easy strategy that doesn't require any additional prep and just a few seconds of your time. So when you are sending an email, that's a passive experience most of the time, unless you do something to actively disrupt it. Emails get sent. The person on the other end is meant to just read it and then delete it or move it to a folder, or maybe reply to the email. But think about the ratio of emails you receive that you read or glaze over or delete versus the ratio of emails you actually reply to. And then think about the most important emails you're sending to your team. A lot of people send out weekly email newsletter updates or, really important information about, onboarding a new client or changing a COVID policy right now, right? So much important information gets conveyed over email. But how many of those critically important emails explicitly ask for a reply? And I don't just mean that phrase we all put at the end of, if you have any questions or concerns, please see me or let me know, or that's not really eliciting a reply. That's opening a door, maybe, for a question, but have an actual question that you want a reply to in the email and make it connected to the purpose of the email. The other thing I want to call out here, if you look at this, we just put this together as a sample email. What do you notice about it? It's a highly readable document in the sense that we're using a lot of text features. We're bolding text, we're using color intentionally, we're chunking information. If this was all clustered together in one paragraph form, it's going to be a lot harder to read and absorb the information. We know people are going to skim their emails, so make your email highly skimmable. Highlight the parts that you want people to skim and draw attention to, and then put a question in and ask for a response. I promise you, you will learn so much information and you will create that processing time to enhance engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. And Emily, is there anything you want to talk about when it comes to subjects of email? One good example here is if you get into the habit of putting a video in your email so that the learner has both the ability to read about the email and watch and listen, you might consider putting video or watch in the subject of your email. Is there any other tips you might have for how to appropriately name the subject? Because we definitely get into chunking information and we talk about chunking in the context of the body of the email. What are your thoughts on the subject?
That's such a good question. I think there's so much you can do with that. Again, if you're just intentional about it, the first thing that kind of comes to mind is work with your team and identify, if you have a number of kind of email types that go out, maybe it's your weekly newsletter. Meet with them, and anytime there's a newsletter, start with that word. Make it all caps and make a norm within your department or within your organization that newsletters are highly important and perhaps they actually require a response. Putting response needed in the subject line, whatever that is. So think about how your organization works and what kind of information goes out. That's really important. I also think there's a lot of room to use capitalization and emojis effectively. Emojis are kind of a missed opportunity. We see them in a lot of marketing emails, but I don't think people realize how they can actually insert an emoji into their own emails. And that's certainly something, if there's interest in it, let us know. We can talk about that on another webinar. But yeah, what are the email subjects that you are most likely to open? Some of them begin with questions a lot of times. So yeah, that's a great topic to explore. You have any answers to that question, Matt?
Yeah, as the IT guy, I think a lot about naming convention and the way that we can organize files, right? Because really, when you think about email, as a notification system, the 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 learner, the person receiving the information that's being asked to understand it and act on it, it's very important to have a consistent naming convention that you're using in your subjects. Just as you said, Emily, if you want to identify the department it pertains to, or a project that it pertains to, an initiative, be consistent in how you're naming emails, because the audience, the learners receiving that, will either have to store it somewhere, they'll have to prepare themselves to absorb the rest of the email. And so if you can help, tee up that mindset. Also, the other thing that we see is urgency being identified in the subject, whether that's deadline, whether that is this something that is passive or active from the learner's side. Love the idea with emojis. Can you get with your team and identify that you're going to use, the little, the little cheerleader horn thing, right? What's that called?
Megaphone.
People are, yeah. As an announcement emoji, are there other emojis? It doesn't have to come off as silly if it's effective.
Right.
And so that's definitely one piece. Also got a question here about is it still perceived as yelling if you're bolding words and phrases?
I think it probably is considered yelling if it's in the body of the email. And I think if you want to use capitalization, you can capitalize meaningful words. But when you start capitalizing entire phrases or sentences, then it can be. But what I would say is if you are sending internal emails to your team and you want to use capitalization to denote some sort of meaning other than I'm yelling at you and I'm furious, have that conversation. There's no reason why you can't be empowered to set some norms and to figure out and reimagine, how you communicate.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got the use of bolding text. We've got the use of capitalization. In the marketing training that we've been through, there's also this idea that you should represent your text as if you were speaking. So read your text as the learner and see how you feel about it before you send it out. If you're just bolding or using different colors, maybe you're color coding sections of an email versus capitalization versus how many exclamation points are you using? Are you really trying to exclaim and boom, 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 or just make an individual, key statement? It's interesting to take a moment before that goes out. And one way, to kind of catch yourself is to revisit this idea of that talking head video. How did you verbally explain the information? What would you emphasize verbally? And are you matching that tone and cadence in your written communication?
So, a couple of things before we jump into this. I know you talked a lot about naming conventions a moment ago. If there's anyone on this webinar that is interested in understanding what naming conventions are or how to use them or more information about them in general, it would make Matt's year if you would put that in the chat, because then we would have a reason to have a whole dedicated webinar on naming conventions, which I don't even know if would be enough time for you to really express all of the knowledge and all of the passion you have about naming conventions. But we could absolutely do that. And kind of the other thing too, if you're thinking about videos or we're talking a lot about videos. In the chat, we're always looking for your feedback. So is that something you're interested in trying? Is it something you've tried that you feel like hasn't gone over well? Do you want to try it but have a specific apprehension about it? All of that information is so helpful. We're really trying to create a webinar series here that's responsive to the kind of information that's going to be useful to you. So please share that with us. And kind of getting back to our strategies here about how to make some active and engaging experiences with your team. We all use presentations, right? Whether they be PowerPoints or Google Slides or whatever platform you're using to create those. And again, those methods of presentation have been developed by and large with the idea of one-way communication. The person who is presenting made the slideshow, they are sharing their information, the audience is expected to listen and look at the screen and absorb whatever the information is that's being presented. You can save yourself a ton of time and increase engagement with your team if the next time you go to share a presentation with your team, I don't want you to design every slide. Leave a couple of slides blank, or just put some key words on a slide that pertain to the most important elements of that presentation. And you're probably saying, like, how is that a good strategy? We're all taught that visuals are really important to help people remember and retain information, and they are. But I would make the argument that in this particular environment, if you are showing up and you have a blank slide or just with a little bit of text on it, and it is a key important concept, you share that information with your team and then you say to them in real time, let's pause for a moment. I want to give you 2 or 3 minutes. I want you to come up with the visuals that belong on this slide, given what we've just talked about. It's sort of the visual equivalent of asking for a one-word summary. So your audience is going to have to think about what you just said, show an understanding of that information, and then they're going to have to internally process that and come up with a visual that to show and represent the meaning behind your message. So you can actually have people Google images, you can have people draw on a Post-it and show, you can have people just talk about what image they would put up there. If it's a Google slide or an Office 365 PowerPoint presentation and they have edit access to it, they can go ahead and put their images directly in there, but close the loop on that. And after that couple of minutes, when they've come up with the visual for that slide, ask them why they put the visual in there that they did, and just have them explain it. It allows for that processing. You're going to get an understanding of how they perceived your message, and it's going to be really valuable. You're going to get feedback on whether or not they actually understood it, or if they focused in on the absolute least important part of what you were sharing. It's a phenomenal opportunity to disrupt passive boredom and to get people to make those connections. And here's kind of an overview of our passive experiences that we're all used to operating in. Watch a video, read information, read your emails, copy these notes down, or just attend meetings. These are all passive experiences. And what we really want to do is, as much as possible, make a small 1-degree shift and make them active experiences. And in our course that we're going to share, in our free course we're going to share with you in just a moment on how to get access to, we really walk through all of these different ways that you can disrupt the passive boredom and increase engagement and increase that active participation with your audience. We delve deeper into asking open-ended questions, how to use a notes template in that course. There's a lot of things that you can just download and print and use, or download and edit to make your own so that it works for your team. And in the end, what we have discovered as a company that's focused on communication and learning is that learners don't resent communication inherently. They don't resent the emails they receive. They don't resent the trainings they're asked to attend. What they resent is when they're asked to absorb information that has no application, that isn't explained clearly enough for them to understand, that has nothing to do with their job and their role. Relevance is so important to getting buy-in. That's perceived to be wasting their time. And a lot of times, our teams feel like things are wasting their time. And you might have a really solid rationale for why it's important and how it connects to your overall mission and goals of your organization. But if you're not conveying that from the learner's perspective, you just added more to their plate, and it's not going to change, not going to enhance anything. So, our mission and our focus when we talk about communication and training is just being a little bit more intentional about these elements.
Yeah, absolutely, Emily. The thinking back to when my job was all about technology integration in the classroom, oftentimes it felt overwhelming to think through all the things you're doing today and all these different strategies, and oh gosh, there's so much I need to change, there's so much I need to consider. In the purpose of dignified learning and this team sharing this information is not to tell you that everything has to change. It's to encourage you to reflect on one specific thing and try and improve it with one small step or change. You don't have to redefine the way you work and communicate, but we would ask that you modify one or two things and then, take the temperature on that. How did that work for you? Did it improve engagement? Has it reduced your team's perception or feeling of stress as it relates to the next meeting or task? Did individuals come more prepared to a meeting or more engaged in conversation? Or are you allowing that processing time and seeing the difference in the quality of feedback or the level of participation where it really matters, right? So again, dignified learning is not here to tell you you have to take every strategy and implement it all at once. In fact, that would be a bad thing. So take your time and identify areas that are the most interesting to you, whether it's reflecting on email subjects or practicing some talking head videos, or having and embedding those open-ended questions in those moments where you think, gosh, this has really been lacking in the past. And I just don't want to have another Zoom meeting that ends like everyone's feeling burnt out or disengaged and just trying to watch the clock till this darn meeting is over so I can get back to work, right? Let's just try and identify the areas in which we can make small improvements that yield the biggest results. And also, I would encourage you to be open with your team to say, we're going to try some new things. This is new to me. This will be new to you. And let's have that open dialogue about feeling vulnerable when we try those new things and see what kind of feedback you're getting from your team.
Yeah, it goes a far way when you really consider your audience. And, that's, like Matt said, that's really why we believe in custom e-learning experiences and custom training. Um, Learners are not in a one-size-fits-all mold, and we all work differently. And the communication that we share with them, whether that's a formal training or an email, needs to reflect that. And our goal is always to focus on that engagement piece, and then by default, if you just focus on that basement level I talked about, right, as engagement as the foundation, everything else you can build upon with that. Once you have engagement, you can have more discussions, you can have more transparency, you can have a larger sense of professionalism. Maybe that's what you're really seeking, in trying to adapt your culture, whatever it is. I guarantee you can't get there if you have a disengaged team. So, explaining a concept and giving, an opportunity for application that's grounded in practicality. It's just go back to the basics. Everything that you do, everything you communicate, start with that and pick one strategy and just see how it goes.
Yeah, and I know Callie's been watching the chat and might have a question or two for us, Emily. Callie, did you want to unmute and let us know if there's anything going on?
Yeah, there was a good question. A theme throughout this webinar has been consistency, and this person wants to know if consistency is as important or more important than implementing these tools, and how you balance staying consistent while adding these new things to your work environment.
Well, yeah, I think if you can't, if you're trying a new initiative or if you're trying a new strategy and you at the very start of the journey feel disempowered and like it's not something you're going to be able to be consistent with, then it's not the right thing to start off with. It's not the right thing to implement. And I would say thinking about, because everybody has more on their plate than they can do, right? So think about what is the one thing that you can add, one idea in here that you can modify, that you can just gradually incorporate, and define consistency for you. Consistency doesn't have to be once a day. Maybe once a quarter or once a month, you try to have a meeting with your team and you try to make it more of a conversation by including those open-ended questions. Think about the things that you already do that are non-negotiable in your job. Maybe you have to record minutes at meetings. Well, what's one way that you can just move the dial and make a little bit more engagement while you're doing that? That would be my suggestion and my advice is just start off and make it so small that it just seems like something that can fold in to what you're already doing.
Yeah, one practical way I found to do that is there are certain emails that I receive that I just know would be better responded to with an open-ended question paired with a 30-second video. And, I know we've talked about video, we've talked about other strategies. You will, as you process through these different strategies, you'll identify scenarios that come up and go, this is a perfect one to try this new way of responding, of structuring my information. We showed that email example of how to chunk information and use bold and use bullets or numbers, have that call to action at the bottom that you're looking for, or that open-ended question that you're looking for. You'll be able to identify these scenarios. And when it comes to consistency, try and respond the same way with the same scenarios, right? If if you're the HR person and every time someone asks, well, how do I get my pay stub? Just how do I do that? And you're like, gosh, I get this question twice a month. Take 1 minute and do a screen recording of how to log into that software, or, hi, this is where that information is stored on Teams. We've got the link out there, whatever it might be. And then save that video, or save the words, save the email. I always have a folder that I just store communications that I've either received or sent, that I just think, oh, that one really worked. The way that was explained to me worked so well. Or the response and feedback I got from this strategy was exactly what I was looking for. I move those into folders so that the next time a similar situation comes up, before I just start from scratch, I go read through that and go, yeah, this question has been posed, and this was the response, and that was the outcome. Let's borrow from that this time.
I love that. Yep. Callie, were there any other questions?
Not that I can see right now.
Okay.
Well, great. Emily, do you want to talk a little bit about the free e-learning course that's going to go out to everyone that participated on this call, that we think is right on message and hopefully right on time, given all of the challenges that we're facing in our various ways that we're communicating today?
Yeah, if you advance a couple of slides, you can see the link to the course. So for this course, this is the link. If you go to dignifiedlearning.com and you click on free resources, this course is in there. Speak so others will listen, read, and act. In that course, I would encourage you to look at it through a couple of lenses. Number one, you'll see a lot of my talking head videos, as Matt calls them, and I would ask that you notice very intentionally the sort of human experience that we captured in those videos. Those videos are not, without flaws, right? I probably misspeak sometimes. I might put an in, or say something that's slightly unscripted. That's very intentional, because I want you to feel like we're just sitting down discussing these ideas. And when we talk about videos especially, we have such a high bar, but really think about how you feel as a learner going through that course. Are you getting the valuable information you need? Are you able to relate to what I'm saying? I hope you enjoy that's a worthwhile resource. There's a lot of documents and templates in there that you can just, like I said, download as is and use, or you can modify them as Word or as Google Docs.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. And I wanted to throw out there just a few tips or ideas as it relates to when you identify you're ready to sit down and learn. Whether that's processing through your email or participating in an e-learning course. Emily, do you have any advice for the group as far as how they can best prepare for learning? What are the things that they should do or not do so that they get the most out of an e-learning experience?
Yeah, I love that question. So, I think the first one is, when we're talking about learning as adults in this kind of environment, it's not compliance-driven learning necessarily. If you choose to access our course and look at it, it's for your own benefit. Think about what engages you. You don't have to do the whole thing from start to finish. That's not the point of it. Skip to lesson 3 if lesson 2 isn't connected to what you're doing. So first, kind of be mindful of what do you want to learn, and keep in mind that There's some disadvantages to asynchronous e-learning, of course, but one of them is that you get to make it your own experience. Think about it like reading a book. I have a friend who gets a book and then reads the last chapter of it before they read anything else. Um, that's your experience as a reader, right? So feel empowered as a learner. I think other than that, thinking about when when are moments when you need to feel like you have the headspace for it, like you have the attention for it. For me, I really try to cultivate learning experiences that I find interesting, that I am curious about, that I want to engage with during moments when I feel most discouraged or most burned out. And when I say a learning experience, I don't mean that I'm sitting down and reading a textbook or taking 3 hours to complete an online course. I mean, like maybe there's just one thing I want to learn how to do that I don't know, how to use a specific tool we're using. And maybe I go to YouTube and watch a video on it, or go and read an article or a blog post. I try to have those resources available so that when I feel the need to kind of get re-engaged and reset, I have those that I can go and pull from and just have the experience of being curious and learning something. That to me is very intrinsically motivating.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. One thing I find myself doing is setting time aside for learning so that it's not just fitting in to our already busy schedule. We're going to identify when do you best focus with the least distractions. For you, it might be in the morning. For me, it might be in the evening. Find that time and try. I know this isn't perfect, but try to dedicate that time as best as possible. And it's really natural for your mind to wander no matter what activity you're doing. But try and bring yourself gently back to the training without the tendency of picking up your phone and seeing if you received any text messages or other notifications. Leave that aside until your dedicated learning time is over. I understand emergencies happen, interruptions happen. We can't avoid that. But the more intentional we can be about being proactive in setting up ourselves to learn, the more you're going to get back from that time.
Well, I really appreciate that. This has been fun. I learned a lot just by putting this together and getting some feedback from our clients on some of the topics they would want us to discuss. Next time, we're going to be talking about e-learning platforms. We get a lot of questions. What in the world is an e-learning platform? What is a learning management system? Do I really need one? Do you have to have an e-learning platform to have e-learning? And I can say as a person without a technical background, I understand how daunting those questions are. So we're going to be delving into that and talking about everything you practically need to know if you're considering e-learning and trying to make the judgment on whether a platform is necessary and what your budget should be. All of those kind of questions we're gonna cover.
Thank you so much, Emily. I want to just leave the last few minutes here for any additional questions that our viewers, our learners might have for us today. We'd be happy to respond to those in real time. We would be happy to follow up with you. You can email both Emily, Callie, or myself. You can go to dignifiedlearning.com and contact us through the website, take our free resources. You can visit us at nextstepnetworking.com to get in contact with us. So thank you all so very much for your time, your questions, and your participation. And we hope to see you next time on another fun and interactive webinar series. So thanks, everybody. And again, I'll just allow a little space here. If you're typing some questions, if you have anything, we'll hang out and watch the chat. Otherwise, feel free to disconnect, take advantage of our free resources, follow us on social media, and we look forward to interacting and engaging with you in the future.